You know, first off, I should probably do a disclaimer. I'm not in any way affiliated with Serious Disclosure or Dr. Greer, these Dr. Greer Expeditions. I am just, the purpose of this is just to let other people know for my own personal documentation of what it was like and the things that happened. So there's got to be a lot of curious people. This is a story about that particular, or one of the stories, my view of what happened September of 2016 in Joshua Tree Park during an expedition. So we're gathered together, we start meditations. He does what's called a puja sometimes, and we sit back and try coherent thought sequencing, which is one of the protocols. We play crop circle tones and things like that, sometimes transmit them with radio. It's all effective, it all works. It's, to some people that might be corny, but so what? I've gotten some very nice affirmations from the people that we try to contact. If they can't come in close, they do definitely have their protocols too. We get indications that they're around, and if you've done this enough, you'll feel them when they're around. So right off the bat, that first night, we get these two lights that they're actually rising, okay? These two bright white lights, and it's obviously not an aircraft or anything. And if you're not there, just bear with me, you know. I know there's a lot of skeptics, and there's nothing wrong with being skeptical. I'm a skeptic. You know, that's why I went to one of these. I wanted to find out if it was for real or not. Until you start seeing things, experiencing things, you're going to, you know, if you're really skeptical, you're going to stay skeptical. But for those people with an open mind, I'm going to tell a story, and this is the story, and it's a true story. So these lights are, and you know, I'm sorry for interrupting again, but my reference to miles are, obviously it's impossible to tell since there's no real reference. So I'm a pilot, and you know, I have to determine many times and how far things are, distance, what type of aircraft and things like that are. And I'm frequently wrong with that, even with references. So that's all I can do, though, the best I can with that, just to help paint the picture for anyone who might be interested. Okay, getting back to those lights, they're headed vertically, they're going up, headed straight out the atmosphere. I'm guessing they're, you know, 50 miles away. They're huge white lights 50 miles away, separated by maybe 10 times the distance of their size, their diameter, maybe 10 times, okay? So they're rapidly going up, but they are also coming towards us. So at one point, I would suspect they're about, you know, maybe 5 miles away. And in that transition, they flew over the 29 Palms military base, which is interesting, and we'll get to that later. But so when it started coming closer, and it spooked some of the people that were with us, because it you know, there's no sound, and that's what's so weird about seeing ET craft. There's no sound. The ones I've seen, they move incredibly fast and there's no sound. So it's hard, unless, you know, if you're seeing an aircraft, for instance, and you see it coming, you don't hear it, and you hear it, and then all of a sudden it starts making noise, you know. That's one of our things our senses expects. But with these, when they're coming closer, you don't hear anything. And that's different. And that can contribute to making it unreal. So you have to believe your eyes, though. So this ship is coming in. There are these two lights. We didn't know it was a ship yet, and then one light pivoted up towards the next one. And when I say pivoted, it appeared that it was attached to a pivot point. So it rotated up by the other one. And in hindsight, you know, that I can't help but think that this thing was Yeah, although I didn't know at the time it was a solid craft. Those lights were connected to one craft. I can't help but think that that was configuring itself to come in closer to us. I think it would have came in closer, but it spooked half the group. I don't know how many exactly, but I think it spooked people. I was excited, and I think most of the people were excited there. So after that, then it went straight up out the atmosphere. So, and disappeared. But it wasn't that night. I mean, we took pictures. We got video of that. We took pictures and with infrared camera. One of the fellows had a setup where one was infrared. And the next, we had that thing appear that we noticed 3 different times during the 6-day period. And when we got a picture of it, then it all made sense. Those lights were on the tips of these immensely long arms. So, what I'm, and this is speculation, I know, I would guess those arms to be, a mile or 2 miles long each. The craft was probably the size of a city. We have a picture of it, like I say. So for something that large to move in that rapidly and not make any noise is incredible in itself. For it to fly over the military base was incredible. I'm sure the military base or NORAD or whatever, they have the capability of tracking just about anything these days. So, what was it? I'm assuming it was an ET craft. Do our military have a craft that size that can cloak? I wouldn't think so, but these days, who knows? Some of the stuff I've heard. Who knows what's going on with all the money that's missing? Could they build something like that with $1 trillion? Sure as hell they could. I'm sure they could, without a doubt. So in an effort to keep this video interesting and relatively short, I'm going to skip through some things. There's 2 more things I want to touch on. One is, for me, I've seen grape-sized white lights and red lights. And this last time, I was just out there last week out in Joshua Tree, and there's a green one. Saw a green one. So, what are these lights? I have no idea. Scintillating lights, too. But, some people see that within the group, and that could represent something. I don't know. But my buddy and I, during break, we leave the group. We know there's ETs out there because we can sense it. So we get to a certain point out there, and we stop. And my buddy says, whoa, he says, you see that? And there's like a white light and then a red light. He says he went swooshing around us like a big ribbon. So he was seeing all kinds of things. And he says, there's a purple light behind your head. And then he says, there it goes. I never saw it. I never saw it, but I took a picture. And the picture picked it up. And I'll have to show that. Maybe it's right here. So that purple light next to my head. Would you be curious? Yeah. Yeah. But I never saw it, which is disappointing. But, what isn't disappointing is the camera picked it up. So I didn't get any pictures of the red one that swooped down, but I did get pictures of red and white, grape-sized lights. Some I could see really faintly. The camera picks them up real easy. So there's definitely stuff going on around us. And he says, we think there's all kinds of ETs around us. He says, I know there are. So we convinced him to go for a walk. We walked for about 50 yards, paused, and everybody sat down, and we did a short meditation. Then we picked up and we started walking another 50 yards or so, and he stops. Now we're single file on a path. On both sides of the path are brush and desert vegetation and, sticks and brush. And so if you leave the path, you're going to be stepping on stuff and making noise, and that's the last thing we want. So he stopped. He's a big guy, and he is wearing a coat. He says there's a red orb 20 feet in front of me. Okay, so I'm like number 4 behind him, thinking, I'd really like to see this orb. This orb shoots off to the right. Now it's about 4 feet off the ground. Orb's about this big around, 8 inches around. Okay, it's red, and there's orange inside, much like a marble, like a glass marble, where you have that wavy stuff in the middle, except it's moving. So you see, you have this reddish, if you take the whole thing together, it looks reddish orange, and it shoots about 10 miles an hour, 4 feet off the ground to the right, goes out about 40 feet, does an arcing turn, 90-degree turn, and then heads north, because we're facing south, heads north and parallel with our path. That's incredible. That is so cool that I saw that. I don't know how many other people saw it. I didn't go around asking. I just assumed everybody saw it. That was on the path. Some of the group was way in the back, so they might not even knew what was going on and never looked. But what's incredible about that is that there was a second orb. Now that one was the same diameter, but it was stretched out to, same diameter, but it was stretched out about 2 foot long. It was fainter. It was like phasing in and out, and it was actually leading the other one. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? Is there somebody out there that knows what that is? I would really like to know. Now, that was cool. That wasn't all of that experience. That's experience out in the path. Other strange things happened. One of them being where a silhouette, a dark silhouette of, it was about 9 foot tall. It would have been a silhouette of a huge, it's human type with shoulders and head. Now, a number of us saw that. And, it was making, you're out in the desert at night. It's dark. So, and for a black silhouette to stand out, you got to imagine that it's darker than the surrounding area, of course, and there's a lot of movement. So this thing formed over a period of maybe 15 seconds after I noticed it. It was 9 foot tall, and the head was what got me going, and that's when I started asking other people. Its head was moving around. So it had a cube-shaped head from my point of view. From somebody else's point of view, it was rectangular from the side view. But from my view, it was a cube-shaped head, and this thing was moving around. So that's when I nudged the 2 people next to me who were watching it, and I said, "Did you just see that?" And they said, "Yeah." So I got the attention of my buddy who was with a couple other people, and and he came in. He saw it right away, and we gradually approached it. So as we did that, we approached it in a non-threatening way. it went forward and just dissipated into the ground. So, you know, that might freak some people out. What was that? You know, you get people with all kinds of views, you know, religious views and things like that. But to go into that with an open mind and experience that, it's incredible. It's so cool. Did I feel in danger? I didn't. I don't think anybody did. You know, it's nice to have a group. You know, if you're out in the desert and something like that happened, you're out in the desert by yourself, that would be a little scary, maybe. Depends on what you're into. So, that was another thing that happened on that path, you know. When getting back to the one where the red ribbon went through and the purple light and all that, by the time we got back to the group, because we, you know, my buddy and I we're all stretching the, we're always stretching the brakes out because we're all having these amazing experiences out there. There's, like I say, it seems like the ETs are out there. They don't want to come in the center of the group. They're too shy or whatever the reason is. But they're out there, and we're looking for them, and they're just watching us on the outside of the group. So I know that sounds crazy to some, but that's my experience. So we're out there during this break and seeing all this stuff go on. She was making the sounds from one Tibetan singing bowl. That sound was somehow changed by the time it hit us. By that time, we had been out there at least 20 minutes. There seemed to be a progressive thing happening for contact with us. I started going into like a dreamy state and started walking back to the group. I was convinced there was some lights in the desert, some red lights, and I was convinced that was a craft on the ground. As it turned out, the light, as we got closer to the group, that was actually the group. But I was in a progressive state, a dreamlike state, and there's no doubt in my mind that had we stayed there, something very significant would have happened. We were probably like at the half-hour mark, so we felt the pressure to come in. So we're walking down the path, and nobody sees us. So the weird thing is that the whole group was behind Dr. Greer, and Dr. Greer was using his laser to identify something out in the field where we had just come from. So as we came closer, we spooked them because all of a sudden we appeared right in front of them. I was at that point, I was pretty excited about what was happening. I was happy about what was going on. And I asked him what was going on. He says, there's a craft. There's an ET craft. He says, there's a 50-foot diameter craft 20 feet off the ground right there. He says, you see the laser going through it. It's diffusing. And I watched that, and it was. And I told him, we were underneath that. That's where we just came from. So that's what was going on. There's stuff going on. Now, where'd that ship come from? That could have been, that night, that could have been from the mothership. Because the big mothership came in, and then I think it was going to come in, like I said earlier, I think it was going to come in closer, but it spooked too much of the group. But, you know, there's no doubt that it had something to do with the mothership. So, one other thing out there is that whenever, you know, that night too, when we're out in the out on the path, now we had noticed this a couple times. We've noticed that walls of fog develop while we're out there. Now we're out in the desert. It's September. It's dry. I think the humidity in that area was between 30 and 40%. So 25-degree spread and dew point would not account for fog developing anywhere. And so now we have these walls of fog developing. They could be hundreds of yards long. and 10 to 15 feet high, depends, the distance. Again, it's hard to judge distance. But, I ask everybody else, I says, does everybody else see that wall of fog out there? It's like, yeah, we see it. Okay, so what does that? What makes these wall of fogs in a contact situation? So, I don't know for sure, but, I've heard that it's the perimeter of a craft. If that's the case, the craft would be very big. And we know that mothership could cloak. In fact, the only way you see it is with infrared. Oh, yeah, the odors one night. The odors was weird. This odor came in, and, some people thought it smelled like the ozone after rain, the clean smelling rain. I didn't think it was that. I thought it was more like, it smelled more like the fumes coming off of a metal foundry. So anyways, I gotta go.